Welcome to Urban American Stories. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. The metallic clang of the container being positioned echoed through the Harris property like a cannon shot. Linda Harris, a 45-year-old farmer, watched helplessly from the porch of her colonial home in Millbrook, Virginia, as David Thompson ran his small, illegal operation with a smug smile on his face. "That's private property, David. You have no right," Linda shouted, her hands shaking with anger as she clutched an already cold cup of coffee. "Private property? Prove it," David replied dismissively, adjusting his faded cap as he supervised the crane positioning the last container. "From now on, everyone pays a toll. $10 a ticket, no exceptions." The road in question, known locally as Harris Road, snaked for 3 miles through the region's farms, connecting the farming community to the main highway. For more than a century, the Harris family had kept the road open and in good condition, allowing neighbors to use it freely. It was an informal arrangement that worked perfectly until David Thompson bought the adjacent property 6 months ago. Linda entered the house and picked up the phone, her fingers quickly dialing the number for the sheriff's office. It was the 5th time that week that she had tried to get help from the authorities. On the other end of the line, the familiar voice of Sheriff Mike Bennett sounded tired. "Ms. Harris, I understand your frustration, but this is a civil matter. You need to resolve this through the proper legal channels." "Mike, my trucks can't deliver production. I have contracts at risk," Linda protested, running a hand through her gray hair. "He's literally extorting the entire community." "I'm sorry, Linda. Hire a lawyer." The situation had begun to deteriorate when David Thompson took over as president of the Millbrook Valley Homeowners Association, HOA. His first action was to question the legitimacy of Harris Road, claiming that there was no formal documentation of ownership. Linda knew the documents existed. They were somewhere in the attic of her house, among decades of family papers. In the kitchen, her 19-year-old daughter Rebecca was organizing a pile of invoices. "Mom, we lost the contract with the farmer's market in Fairfax. They can't wait 2 extra hours for each delivery." Linda sat heavily at the kitchen table, watching through the window as David set up a makeshift toll booth. The garish lime green paintwork was an added insult to the bucolic landscape of the valley. "I can't let this happen, Becca," Linda muttered, more to herself than to her daughter. "Your grandfather built this road with his own hands. Before him, your great-grandfather allowed it to be opened through our land to help the community." The sound of an angry horn cut through the air, another frustrated farmer discovering Thompson's new toll booth. Linda recognized the red pickup of Frank Martinez, her neighbor from across the valley. $10 or turn around." David's voice sounded satisfied, almost humming the words. "That's ridiculous," Frank protested. "I have to deliver milk twice a day. That's $20 a day. It's the new HOA rules," David replied with false cordiality. "We're improving the local infrastructure." Linda grabbed her keys and hurried off, Rebecca at her heels. Approaching the toll booth, she confronted David. "What improvements, Thompson? You're the only one making a profit here. This is illegal, and you know it." David smiled, his cold eyes fixed on Linda. "Prove it's illegal. In the meantime, it's $10 or go back the way you came." Frank Martinez turned off his truck and joined the group. "Linda, this can't go on. Half the producers in the valley depend on this road." "And you're all going to pay," David interrupted, "where you can go around the interstate. It's only an extra of 40 minutes. Rebecca, a first-year law student at the University of Virginia, pulled her mother by the arm. "Mom, we need to document all of this. Photos, videos, records of forced payments. I'll call Professor Anderson. He specializes in real estate law." Linda nodded, feeling a spark of hope for the first time in days. "Frank, can you get the other producers together? We need to get organized." "Sure, Linda. I'll make some calls today." David watched the conversation with an increasingly tense smile. "Do whatever you want. In the meantime, it's $10 to spend." That evening, Linda rummaged through the attic, decades of family history stored in dusty boxes. Rebecca methodically scanned every document that seemed relevant, creating a digital archive of the estate's history. "Look at this, Mom," Rebecca exclaimed, holding up a yellowed envelope. These are the original road plans, signed by great-grandfather in 1923. And there's more agreements with all the neighbors at the time. Recognizing the road as Harris property, Linda took the documents with trembling hands. This proves that the road is ours. It always has been. Yes, but we need more. Thompson will dispute all of this. We need to show continuous use, regular maintenance, all the investments our family has made over the years. Distant thunder heralded an approaching storm, and Linda couldn't help wondering what her road, would look like after the rain. David Thompson certainly wouldn't lift a finger to do any maintenance, despite his talk of improvements. Tomorrow I'm going to the county registry office, Linda decided. There should be official records there too, and I'll make an appointment with that lawyer your teacher recommended. Rebecca smiled, hugging her mother. Let's sort this out, Mom. Thompson doesn't know who he's messing with. Linda returned the hug, but her gaze was fixed on the darkness beyond the window, where the containers formed a grotesque barrier across their property. The battle was just beginning, and she knew that David Thompson would not give up easily. But the Harrises had built this community on hard work and solid principles, and she would not allow a local tyrant to destroy that legacy. The sun had barely risen when Linda Harris heard the familiar rumble of engines. A caravan of pickups and trucks was approaching Harris Road, led by Frank Martinez's old Ford F-150. Linda smiled as she saw more than 24 local producers gathering near the containers blocking the road. What is this? A revolution? David Thompson emerged from his makeshift booth, still wearing his plaid robe and slippers, his coffee spilling as he walked hurriedly. No, Nubby, it's a community meeting, Frank replied, climbing down from his pickup. Everyone here has something to say about your illegal toll. Rebecca Harris discreetly filmed the scene from inside the car, documenting every moment as her law professor had advised. Linda watched proudly as her daughter held the camera steady, capturing the farmer's tense expressions and Thompson's growing nervousness. Mary Chun, owner of the largest organic farm in the valley, stepped forward. My family has been using this road since 1965, David. We've never paid a dime because the Harrises have always kept it as a service to the community. Times have changed, David retorted, smoothing out his robe with feigned dignity. The HOA voted. What vote? Interrupted George Peterson, a 78-year-old gentleman who raised sheep at the end of the valley. No one received notice of any meeting. Linda took the opportunity to hand out copies of the documents she had found in the attic. I have here the original deeds, the agreements with the neighbors dating back to 1923, and maintenance records for the last 90 years. David picked up one of the copies, his face visibly paling as he read. This doesn't mean anything. They're old papers. They're probably not even legal anymore. They're perfectly legal. A new voice joined the discussion. Linda turned to see Catherine Maxwell, the lawyer Rebecca had contacted through her teacher, walking towards a group. Her navy blue suit contrasted with the farmer's work clothes, but her presence conveyed a confidence that immediately changed the dynamic of the situation. Ms. Harris, Catherine greeted Linda with a firm handshake. I brought some things that might interest Mr. Thompson. She opened her briefcase, pulling out a stack of documents. First, a temporary court order demanding the immediate removal of these containers. Second, proof that the HOA vote was held without the necessary quorum, rendering it invalid. David picked up the papers with trembling hands, his face turning redder and redder. This is ridiculous. I'll contest it. Be my guest, Catherine replied calmly. But in the meantime, you have 2 hours to remove this illegal obstruction, or you will face substantial fines and possible criminal charges for extortion. The assembled producers began to murmur in approval. Linda noticed Rebecca smiling as she continued filming. Her daughter had planned all this meticulously. I can't remove the containers in 2 hours, David protested, his previous arrogance beginning to crumble. Frank Martinez stepped forward. Well, luckily we brought enough equipment. Tyler, he called, and a huge crane began to move down the road, operated by his eldest son. Linda watched with satisfaction as David Thompson retreated to his house, still protesting, but clearly defeated. Catherine Maxwell began organizing the producers, making sure everything was properly documented while the containers were removed. Mom, Rebecca approached, still filming. Professor Anderson said we can use this as a case study in law school. It's a perfect example of how rural communities can legally defend themselves against abuses of authority. Linda hugged her daughter proudly. You did an amazing job, honey. Your grandfather would be proud. As the containers were removed one by one, Mary Chin approached Linda. We need to organize ourselves better after this. Form our own association, document the use of the road, make sure this doesn't happen again. I agree, Linda replied. Catherine, would that be possible? The lawyer nodded, making notes on her pad. Absolutely. We can create a formal shared use agreement, establish maintenance responsibilities, all legally documented. The sun was high when the last container was removed. David's small lime green cabin was the last thing to be dismantled, its pieces stacked neatly in front of his house. Throughout the process, he stood on his porch, alternating between making empty threats and trying to negotiate. It's not over, Harris, he shouted one last time before slamming the front door. No, it's not over, Linda muttered to herself, watching the producers begin to clear away the last vestiges of the blockade. But now we're ready. Catherine gathered everyone in front of the Harris house for one last chat. We're going to need statements from everyone about the historical use of the road. The more documentation we have, the better our position if he tries something again. What about the HOA? Asked Frank. He's still the president? For now, Catherine smiled. I've already requested a full audit of his actions over the last 6 months. I have a hunch that toll money isn't the only problem we're going to find. Rebecca, who had finally put the camera away, started handing out forms for the depositions. Linda observed with pride how her daughter had become a true leader during this whole situation. You know, Mary Chin commented as she filled in her form, maybe we should thank David. He's managed to bring the whole community together like never before. Linda laughed, realizing it was true. There they all were, neighbors who sometimes went months without seeing each other, now united by a common purpose. As the producers began to leave, each with their own form to fill in, Linda knew that something important had changed in the valley. It wasn't just about a road or an illegal toll. It was about a community rediscovering its collective strength. The Millbrook County Recorder's Office was silent when Linda Harris and her attorney, Catherine Maxwell, discovered something disturbing in the HOA's records. David Thompson hadn't just installed an illegal toll. He had a much bigger plan in motion. Look at this. Catherine pointed to a recent document. Thompson submitted a petition for rezoning. He wants to turn the entire agricultural area into a luxury gated community. Linda felt her stomach turn. He can't do that. That land is protected by the state's agricultural preservation program. Apparently, he found a loophole, Catherine explained, flipping through more pages. And that's not all. He's been manipulating the HOA's accounts for months, diverting maintenance funds to a real estate development company, Thompson Enterprises LLC. Rebecca, who was scanning old documents at a nearby table, raised her head. Mom, that explains why he was so desperate to control the road. Without guaranteed access, no developer would touch the project. Linda's cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Frank Martinez. Emergency meeting in my farm. Thompson is dumping debris in the creek that runs through his land. He's gone mad, Linda muttered, showing the message to Catherine. That's perfect, the lawyer smiled. I'm going to call the Environmental Protection Agency right now. Environmental crime is exactly what we needed to speed things up. When they arrived at the Martinez property, a dozen trucks were already parked in the field. The sound of heavy machinery echoed through the valley, and a cloud of dust rose where Crystal Creek meandered between the properties. Frank Martinez was waiting for them, his face red with anger. He says he's improving the watercourse to prevent flooding, but he's destroying an entire ecosystem. Mary Chin came running up, holding her tablet. I got photos before he kicked me out. There are chemicals mixed in with the rubble, probably toxic. Catherine was already on the phone to the EPA, relaying coordinates and details. Rebecca continued to document everything, her camera capturing the moment 3 black SUVs from the Environmental Protection Agency entered the property. David Thompson emerged from his bulldozer, still maintaining his air of superiority. This is private property. You have no right. Mr. Thompson, an EPA agent interrupted, flashing his badge. "We have an emergency inspection order. Please shut down all machinery immediately." Linda watched with satisfaction as the agents took samples and photographed the destruction. One of them, after testing the water, made an urgent gesture to his colleagues. "Mr. Thompson," the lead agent announced, "we are detecting alarming levels of industrial chemicals. You are in custody for serious violations of federal environmental laws." As David was escorted to one of the vehicles, Catherine took the opportunity to present the agents with evidence of the real estate scam. This was not an isolated incident. It's part of a larger plan to decharacterize this entire protected area. The news spread quickly throughout the valley. By nightfall, local reporters began to arrive, turning the environmental scandal into a statewide headline. "Linda," Rebecca called out to her mother, showing her laptop, "Professor Anderson says we can use this to set a legal precedent. If we can prove that the HOA was used as a tool for environmental crimes, we can dissolve it completely." Catherine nodded. "More importantly, we can establish a new local governance structure, one that truly protects the interests of the farming community." Mary Chun, who had returned with coffee for everyone, suggested, "We could create a cooperative, something that preserves our way of life and protects this land for generations to come." The idea caught fire among the producers. Soon, the impromptu meeting turned into a planning session, with Catherine advising on the legal aspects while Rebecca and Linda organized the ideas into a concrete action plan. "We need to act fast," Frank warned. "As soon as Thompson gets out on bail, he'll try to destroy evidence." "Don't worry," Catherine smiled, showing her phone. "I've just received notification. The judge denied bail because of the risk of destroying evidence, and the police have a search warrant for his house right now." Linda watched the sun set over the valley, the long shadows dancing over the fields her family had cultivated for generations. The stream, though damaged, still sparkled with the last golden rays of the day. There was a lot of work ahead to reverse the damage done by Thompson, but for the first time in months, she felt real hope. "You know," she said, turning to the group, "my father always said that good land attracts bad people. But he also said that strong communities are like deep roots. The more someone tries to pull them out, the firmer they become." Rebecca hugged her mother, while the other producers silently agreed. The valley had changed forever, but perhaps, Linda thought, it was a change for the better. Out of the destruction caused by Thompson, a new form of togetherness was being born, stronger and more resilient than any HOA could have imagined. The revelation of David Thompson's criminal scheme triggered a series of events that no one in Millbrook Valley could have predicted. One rainy morning, Linda Harris found her mailbox stuffed with official envelopes, subpoenas from dozens of other landowners in the area, all victims of similar schemes orchestrated by Thompson. "Look at this, Mom," Rebecca said, spreading the documents out on the kitchen table. Thompson tried the same scam in 3 different counties, always using HOAs as a front for his illegal real estate ventures. Catherine Maxwell arrived with more disturbing news. The EPA investigation uncovered a pattern. Thompson would buy strategic properties, purposely contaminate natural resources, and then pressure neighbors to sell their land for low prices, claiming environmental degradation. "That bastard," Frank Martinez growled, slamming his fist on the table. "How many families did he ruin?" The answer came via Mary Chun, who entered carrying her laptop. "According to the records I was able to access, at least 12 families have lost their properties in the last 5 years, all following the same pattern." Linda felt a chill as she realized how close her community had come to being the next victims. "We need to find these families," she declared. "Maybe we can help them get their land back." "I'm already working on that," Catherine replied. "The Attorney General's office is putting together a federal case against Thompson. Real estate fraud, environmental crimes, extortion, the list only gets longer." Rebecca, who had spent the morning analyzing documents with her law school classmates, made a crucial discovery. Thompson didn't act alone. There's a whole network of people involved, including within the local government. Sheriff Mike Bennett, who had initially refused to interfere, showed up at the Harris farm that afternoon. His normally impassive face showed signs of concern. "Linda, I'd come to apologize. I should have investigated your complaints more thoroughly." "What's changed, Mike?" Linda asked, Watching the sheriff nervously fiddle with his hat, we found out that my predecessor was on Thompson's payroll. That's why so many complaints have been ignored over the years. He paused, visibly upset. I'm cooperating fully with the FBI now. News of the federal investigation spread quickly through the community. Farmers and landowners began meeting regularly at the Harris farm, sharing stories and evidence. Catherine and her team worked tirelessly, building a solid case that went far beyond illegal tolling. It's not just about our road anymore, Linda reflected during one of these meetings. It's about stopping people like Thompson from destroying entire communities out of greed. Mary Chun, who had established contact with some of the displaced families, brought an interesting proposal. What if we turned this into something bigger? An organization that helps rural communities defend themselves against predatory speculators. The idea quickly gained momentum. Rebecca, with her developing legal knowledge, began drafting statutes for a new nonprofit organization. Frank Martinez offered part of his property to serve as headquarters, and other producers pledged initial donations. We can create a legal and technical support network, Catherine suggested. Help other communities identify and combat similar schemes before it's too late. As the plans developed, the consequences of Thompson's actions continued to unfold. The EPA discovered that the contamination of Crystal Creek was even more serious than initially suspected, requiring an extensive environmental remediation project. Let's turn this into an opportunity, Linda proposed. We can use the reclamation process as a pilot project to show how farming communities can work together to preserve their natural resources. The press began to pay attention to the story. Journalists from major outlets showed up in the valley, attracted by the narrative of a small rural community facing a sophisticated criminal scheme. Linda found herself giving interviews, sharing not only her story, but also the larger vision that had emerged from the struggle. What started as a dispute over a road has turned into a movement, she explained to a Washington Post reporter. We are fighting to preserve not only our land, but a way of life that is rapidly disappearing in this country. Rebecca, watching her mother become a respected community leader, couldn't help but smile. You know, Mom, when we started this, I thought it was just about defending our property. Now I see it's about so much more. It's about justice, Linda replied, hugging her daughter, and about making sure that other communities don't go through what we went through. The sun was beginning to set over the Millbrook Valley, casting golden shadows over the fields that had been the scene of so much transformation. Linda Harris watched her community come together, planning and dreaming of a better future, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. Somehow, Thompson's attempt to destroy their way of life had resulted in something extraordinarily positive, a stronger, more united community determined to make a difference. A year had passed since the initial confrontation with David Thompson, and the Millbrook Valley was unrecognizable, not for the destruction he had tried to cause, but for the positive transformation his community had managed to bring about. Linda Harris was standing on the newly built deck of the Rural Protection Community Center, formerly Frank Martinez's abandoned barn. The restored building now housed the headquarters of the Alliance for the Protection of Rural Communities, APCR, the organization that had been born out of her fight against Thompson. "Mom," Rebecca called, coming up the stairs with a stack of documents. The judge just approved the latest restitution. The families in the neighboring county will get their property back. Linda smiled, remembering how it had all started with a simple roadblock in her driveway. Now, the APCR had helped more than 50 families recover land lost to similar fraudulent schemes in 3 different states. Ms. Harris, a familiar voice, snapped her out of her thoughts. It was Amanda Rees, one of Thompson's first victims they had managed to track down. "I brought some people who need help." Behind her, 3 farming families from Pennsylvania were waiting nervously. Linda recognized the look on their faces. It was the same one she'd had a year ago, when it seemed she was fighting alone against an impossible force to overcome. "Come in," Linda gestured, leading them into the main meeting room. "Catherine is on her way, and Mary Chun has prepared all the necessary paperwork." The interior of the center was bustling. In one room, Frank Martinez was conducting a workshop on rural property rights for a group of farmers. In another, environmental experts were discussing strategies for recovering contaminated areas, using the case of Crystal Creek as a model study. "It's amazing how much everything has changed," Rebecca commented, organizing the files on her laptop. "Remember when we thought it was just about an illegal toll?" Linda nodded, looking through the window at the valley her family had protected for generations. Crystal Creek, now completely reclaimed, snaked between the properties like a silver ribbon. The fields were green, and new signs marked the boundaries of the newly established Millbrook Agricultural Preservation Area. Ms. Harris called Catherine Maxwell, entering the room with her usual leather briefcase. "The final FBI report has arrived. You need to see this." The document revealed the full extent of Thompson's operation. His scheme had stretched across 5 states, involving dozens of corrupt public officials and causing losses estimated at more than $50 million. "He's going to spend a lot of time in prison," Catherine explained. "And most importantly, all the properties will be returned to the original owners." Mary Chin rushed in, carrying her tablet. "I've just received confirmation. The governor is going to sign the Rural Communities Protection Act next week." "We did it." The legislation, inspired by Millbrook's fight, established specific protections for agricultural communities against predatory speculation and strengthened environmental regulations in rural areas. "Linda," Frank called from the doorway, "the NPR reporters have arrived for their interview about the mentoring program." The program was APCR's latest initiative, connecting experienced rural communities with others facing similar threats. It was a support system that Linda wished she'd had when her own struggle began. Thompson never imagined that his illegal tolling would end up creating all this, Rebecca reflected, gesturing to the busy downtown. "Sometimes you need a villain to create heroes," Linda replied, remembering her father's words about strong roots becoming firmer under pressure. The afternoon progressed, and more people arrived for the APCR's monthly meeting. Farmers, lawyers, environmentalists, and community activists, an unlikely alliance that had formed out of adversity. "I have something to show you," Catherine announced, projecting a map onto the wall. "These red dots are all the communities we've already helped. The blue ones are the ones requesting support now." The map was dotted with colors, forming a network of communities connected by the same struggle and the same values. "And to think it all started with some containers blocking a road," Frank commented, provoking laughter in the room.